So with that reminder for me, there is a famous story in Buddhism of the Buddha, supposedly when he was about 6 or 7. It was the springtime. It was apparently a nice spring day. And his father was leading the ritual first plowing of the season. So they were out in the field plowing this. It was kind of a little bit of a festival, maybe like we'll do next week. And then, because everyone was involved in the plowing, they left this little boy alone, and he felt safe, secure, comfortable being there. And he was under, they say, a rose apple tree. I love it that they remember the tree that he was sitting under. So in the shade, watching all this happen in front of him. And maybe he got a little bit absorbed in what was happening. He felt content and happy. It was engaging for his eyes, maybe, and he was following it. And in the process of that, he got concentrated and entered into a relatively light samadhi. But still, it was an inner state of well-being, of unification, of being settled and peaceful. And that was nice for him, until he was about 36. And then by that time he had spent years practicing as an ascetic, about 6-7 years, trying to find a way to liberation in the systems of India at the time. And none of it worked for him. And so one day he was sitting, meditating, and probably because he's at tail end of his ascetic period, he was probably looked pretty emaciated. He was kind of an extreme ascetic of sorts. But he was sitting meditating, and he remembered that experience from about 30 years before. And he recognized that experience was onward leading. That experience had taste or flavors of the liberation he was looking for. That it was pointing to the possibility onward to liberation in a way that none of his previous practices he did, and none of the somehow showed that to him. And he got, I don't know if he got excited, but he got inspired that this was the way to liberation. And that this kind of deep samadhi, as being settled, quiet, peaceful, was not to be feared. Not to be afraid of that, this way of being. So when he was 36, he remembered this experience, and that was kind of his entryway to that experience, to kind of remembering that. Maybe he felt some of it by memory, and so then he started his path, and he got into that state again. And then from there, built his samadhi until he got strong enough samadhi that he was in a good state for his awakening. So a childhood experience of well-being, of being settled, peaceful, at home, comfortable. Probably not something you strong enough that some of you, if you had something like that as a kid, occurred to you to tell anyone. It's just some of you maybe had something like that as a kid in the garden. I had it under the kitchen table. And I put a white sheet over it and made myself a little tent, and the beautiful sunlight would come in there. I was so safe in the kitchen. I think my mom was cooking, so nice, wonderful sounds around me that helped me feel kind of cozy. And I remember feeling so peaceful, so at ease, and there was a feeling of probably purity or very clean state just underneath in the white sheet, the white light coming in, and me just being so cozy and contented there. And so it was an experience that he had. Once he was enlightened, the Buddha started teaching. And they say, the way it's classically taught in Buddhism, he taught the Dharma. And the Dharma is the closest word probably to that corresponds to the English words religion or spirituality. So those are Western terms that are relatively complicated for some of us. And some of us avoid one more than the other, or some of us are happy to use it and not use it. It's a complicated words, the whole word. But the comparable word in In India, it was Dharma. And in this, and the Dharma has many meanings, but has two primary meanings. It means the teachings of the Buddha, and it means the experience that he's pointing to, like the experience he had as a 6-year-old. Something very personal, a personal process, a personal experience, something to be experienced for yourself. And both those terms for Dharma are encapsulated in a very famous, it's part of the liturgy. This is chanted by monastics every day, where they chant the qualities, the characteristics of what the Dharma is. And begins by saying, the Dharma, well taught, well spoken by the Buddha, is. And so, and then they describe the Dharma, the qualities, characteristics of this thing called Dharma. So in one way, he's saying the teachings taught by the Buddha is this way. But as you hear these 5 characteristics, it's not just his teachings, it's the Dharma, the inner process, the inner connection that we are to have in doing this practice. This is what this inner connection is, the inner Dharma, this experience, this feeling we're supposed to have. So you see this play, it goes back and forth, these two meanings. And what that represents for me is that to whatever degree Buddhism is a religion, it's a religion that is based on our own personal experience. And so those 5 characteristics are the Dharma is here and now. It's here in the present moment. The literal language of it is it's visible here and now. So visible, something you can experience, sense, and feel for yourself. That it's immediate. It's not something you wait for. In the future, you'll get the rewards, in a sense. There's something about the immediacy that we can experience here and now. It's like now. What there's really about is not. It's almost like what it's really about is not about time. And then it is onward leading, meaning that there's something about it that kind of opens a door, or puts you on a trail, puts you on a road that's onward leading, or puts you on a slide. There's something there. There's a feeling. There's something's opening for you there. Here, come and just go forward here. And then it is. And then now they're using a very colloquial expression for the next characteristic that literally says, hey, come and see. Come and see for yourself. Usually people they translate it a little bit more sophisticatedly. They say, inviting inspection. The Dharma invites inspection. So this onward leading, this Dharma, come and look for yourself. There's something about the nature of this experience that is kind of requesting or inviting you. And if this Dharma is to be found in yourself, then you can imagine it's the heart's request, it's the heart's inspiration, it's the heart's longing or desire that is inviting you. Come here, deeper, deeper. Into what? Whatever it is, the last characteristic of the Dharma is that it's to be experienced by the wise. And this is a very nice way of speaking about you. To be experienced by the wise. And no, it's more detailed than that. It's to be experienced personally, to be personally experienced by the wise. So there's very individual. It's like this is something you can experience. And some things in life you can only really experience for yourself. You can't ask someone else to do it for you. And there's something about the movement towards spiritual freedom, inner freedom, freedom of the heart. You can't ask someone else to free their heart so you don't have to. That doesn't, I guess it'd be nice for them, but it doesn't really do something for you if you contract it out to someone else to do it for you. The meditation's really great. And I'm going to take all my money, and I'm going to get, it's so great, I'm going to pay 10 people to meditate for me. So I don't have to. It's ridiculous. There's no point. Meditation is something you're supposed to be experienced for yourself. So the same thing with liberation. So this personal experience. And so as a 7-year-old, 6-year-old, he experienced something that inspired him when he was older. And what's called, the word for inspiration in the ancient language means, literally means something like to have a feeling for the purpose or the meaning or the goal. The word is atta in Pali, and some of you know Sanskrit, it's artha. So it has multiple meanings. But atta Veda, which means to have a feeling. And this Veda can be inspired, be aroused, but often it means like a feeling. And then, or knowing, a deep knowing. And then to be, have this Dhamma Veda, inspired in the Dharma, this Dharma feeling, this Dharma movement inside the heart. And so this kind of inner feeling that we can have. And the reason I'm giving this talk today is because yesterday we sat under the Bodhi tree here, meaning we had a day-long retreat here. And it was really nice to sit here. There were about 45 people meditating. And I've been really, ever since the pandemic, people coming to these day-longs, they seem to sit so well. They're quiet and intent, and they're very sincere and dedicated. And during this day-long, I saw, 16 people for 15-minute meetings to talk about their practice. And there was something about every single one of them. They had a wide range of things they wanted to talk about. But every one of them came with a certain kind of sincerity, where they were coming to talk about something that was important. And something about them had gathered together in some kind of, like they were connected to something inside. Some kind of, this is important. I'm here to share something that's valuable for me. Even if what they were talking about was their suffering, their challenges in life. It's like there was a kind of a coming together. And I was so inspired by this, by some kind of inner, something inside of them that had gathered together to engage in this, in their process of the Dharma, of practice, of spirituality, of religion. And some of them it was more clear the nature of this gathering together. And some of them clearly had years of meditation practice behind them. And it was the years of practice somehow that I could feel the accumulated combination of their intentionality, their sense of purpose, and what they've been doing, and for all these years, it felt like they're here. They might have had a mind that was overactivated and felt like they weren't getting concentrated, but I could feel that there was something here. And in some of them, the best way I could characterize it to myself, and one of them to that person, was there was a contemplative heart, contemplative nature inside of them, that of a contemplative. I think the person got a little bit scared because they associated that with becoming a monastic. But I reassured her that's not what I meant. And but there's a kind of a inner sensibilities, a kind of faith, a kind of sense of being connected to something that's really good, onward leading, something that feels certainly pleasant in a certain way, but exactly how to characterize it for any, maybe it's very different for different people, but something within that's very peaceful, maybe, or warm, or sense of this is home, or this is where some kind of different quality of joy or happiness, well-being exists that's very different than the joy of winning the California the lottery. That's maybe joyful for a little while, but that's actually, at the end of that day of celebrating, you're probably exhausted and or crying. but this deep and peace. There is something the Buddha called the greatest happiness is peace. So some sense, some hint, some feeling, quality for something inside that's living there. And I've had, coming down here, thinking about this talk today, walking down here, I was kind of decided I would try to remember the different times in my life where I experienced this kind of thing, even before I started meditating. And so, so that I described under the kitchen table. I grew up on the water a lot, next to the water. I'm from Norway, and on the coast there, and there's sometimes being on the fjords early in the morning with the water completely still and quiet, no wind. Somehow that just was like that under the rose apple tree experience. Knew that's where I was supposed to be. That's where it was peaceful. That was things felt full and complete, and nothing else had to happen. When I was 10, there was something that's happened on the public bus coming home from school. It was they called it a conductor. They had the driver and they had the person who sold the tickets back then. This was in Italy. And I discovered, I never thought about it at the time, I just kind of did it by instinct, but I discovered that if I sat in a certain seat, because I lived at the end of the bus line, if I sat at the end of the seat, the conductor would sit in front of me and would take out his ledger and record all the different tickets he sold for that trip. The round trip, one way, children, old people, whatever it was. He had a whole bunch, and he had to keep a log. And I would sit over him, I'd look over his shoulder, and watch him with his pencil and his doing his numbers, whatever he did. And I would just start feeling so good. I just felt, And I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't like grabbing it or wanting more of it. It was just like, I knew I should do this. And then when I stopped going on the bus, it never occurred to me to want that again. It was just almost like instinctual. It was like the sun rises in the morning. I would just go sit there and have this good feeling. Years later, when I started meditating, so that's what I was experiencing. That was a wonderful feeling for me of being at peace, being at ease, being in myself, comfortable. Even though my life around me was quite I was moved around a lot when I was growing up, and I was in a new city, new language, new country. I didn't know anybody, and on a bus where I don't know, so it was in some ways a challenging time, but that bus ride was a refuge for me. And then I kind of had begun meditating, but then I stopped when I lived with my friends on their farm. And because I was living there for a while, they decided they could take a difficult to acquire vacation because they had these cows, had to be milked every day. So now I could do it, feed them, milk them. And so I was left alone for the first time in my life for 5 days and didn't see anyone really, or talk to anyone for those 7 days a week. And again, I had this feeling that welled up being alone that long time in a beautiful Norwegian kind of rural place with these wonderful girlfriends that I had, that I loved so much, and caring for them, and so this wonderful feeling grew up with, this time also with a tremendous clarity of mind. Like it wasn't that I stopped thinking, but I started seeing every thought like a diamond. It was just like, no matter how bad the thought was, it was like, wow. And that also was something I had started in meditation later. I started, that was kind of a state, meditation. Often people can have on a retreat. And but this was so important, that experience. Well, when my friends came back, I lost it. It disappeared. But it was so important for me that this was really something to guide a life with. This I have faith in. This is something I'm inspired by. So I had this Dharma feeling, this Dharma inspiration around this experience. And so then it became my dedication to figure out how to answer this question. And the question was, how can I be alone with others? I didn't want to be a hermit, because that's what I was alone for this week. But I didn't. I wanted to have this experience. It felt like this is how to be alive. And maybe it's a strange expression for some people to hear me wanting to be alone with others. But there was a best way at 20 that I could somehow understand what I was trying to do. I wanted to be with people, connected to people, involved in the world, but I wanted also to come from that place of that clarity and that peace inside. So this was an example then of an onward leading in the present moment. It was timeless. It was to be experienced by someone who was attempting to be wise on his way. And so all these things were behind me to get interested in Buddhism, Buddhist practice, meditation. It was there as a kind of a reference point or a guide. And then as we practice, this kind of inner feeling of what the Dharma is, what this religious experience, this contemplative experience, this spiritual experience, this kind of can start becoming a clearer reference and a clear sense, oh, this is important, this is valuable. And how do I allow this to grow in my life and develop and flower, rather than just have it be something I occasionally touch in meditation or occasionally touch in with by going on retreat? How do you live from this deeper sensitivity, this deeper feeling, this deeper kind of peace that's possible? And each person, each of you will have a different way of describing it. There's a lot of different ways, so I don't want to use my words and just get you to believe you're supposed to have it like me. But to have this Dharma feeling, this Dharma sensibility, this Dharma, this inspiration, and sometimes the Buddha was explicit that it can come from the experience of a variety of things it can come from. All of them are considered part and parcel of Buddhist practice. It can come from living ethically. And there's something about ethical integrity that can touch into this place. That you feel like now, it isn't just like you're making ethical choices through your life, but there's a feeling that ethics is arising out of some kind of deeper feeling of what it's like to have a certain kind of ethical integrity. The Buddha said it can come out of generosity. There's a way of being generous, of being magnanimous, being open-handed to people and to others and to the world, rather than miserly or clinging or hoarding. That just kind of something about, there's a movement of freedom in opening your hand and giving away. And that in that, and done well, also can give a person, someone, that Dharma feeling, that feeling for what the goal is. And you can maybe feel a little bit more like that with generosity, because generosity is a liberation of things. It is a letting go of something. So it's a kind of precursor of the deep letting go that liberation is. And then in the letting go that we begin experiencing, at some point, a very special point arises where the letting go that we do, that we experience for ourselves, gives rise to a real clear feeling of the goodness of letting go, the peace, the warmth, the happiness of letting go, of the heart not being clenched or contracted or hard or crusted over or armored or something. And you can really feel, oh, look at this is good. It might be, one metaphor the Buddha used was an open path in an overgrown jungle. Have you ever tried to go through an overgrown jungle with there's no path? It can go slow going. you finally find the path, then you're even lost. You know, where's that path? And you're lost, and you're going around. I've done that and ended up all scratched up and bloody because it was so dense. And then finally the open path is there, and it just feels like now I'm sailing through. It just feels so good. Like I can just, I know where I'm going. I'm finally safe. I'm heading home or something. Whatever. But now there's, it's unencumbered to go that way. So to have that feeling in your heart, and to have it so clear that that represents this Dharma feeling for the Dharma, or this inspiration, this contemplative feeling, this spiritual feeling that we have in Buddhism. It's a little bit hard for people coming out of Western religions to understand this can be a form of religious experience, and if so much of the religious experience is around a relationship to a deity or something that's outside of you. But it might be very comparable, the kind of deep experience. It just has a different kind of object of where it's directed. And here in the Dharma, it's directed to an experience we're having that then grows and inspires us. And one of the reasons why this inspiration is so good is that for the Buddha, when we kind of really get a feel for it, it gives rise to joy. A joy that doesn't take us away from the present moment, puts us into the present more fully. And so it supports the practice of mindful presence, being really here. And it's a joy that begins setting in motion this onward leading nature of a certain way, a joy that leads to happiness, a happiness that leads to a peace that leads to it's a gladness that leads to joy, a joy that leads to tranquility, a tranquility that leads to happiness, and a happiness that leads to a deep version of this samadhi, a deep, deep version of this feeling of being under the rose apple tree. So it was nice yesterday being here and feeling that there were people who were expressing in how they were sitting, how they were talking. You could feel that their kind of very wonderful sense of purpose that they had. For some of them, it came from having something in there that was saying, this is the path, this is what they're doing. They'd practiced long enough, you could see that there was this wonderful way in which they were giving the practice a chance, meditation practice a chance, to really change them and open them and reshape themselves in some kind of profound way because of how much they sat and what they dedicated to and what they were allowing to grow and see coming. And so I was inspired, and my hope was to share that inspiration with you coming here today. So maybe you have a contemplative heart. I think everyone does, but maybe we shouldn't maybe there's a better word for you than contemplative heart. Maybe you have a practice heart, and practice orientation. Maybe you have a not a liberated heart, but maybe you have a liberating heart, a heart that wants to be liberated. Maybe you prefer the word love. Maybe you have a loving heart, and your feeling of what love is. It's love that needs nothing. It's so deep. Maybe that's the experience we're talking about here for you. So maybe also this is a nice talk before we celebrate the Buddha's birthday next week. We're celebrating his birthday, his enlightenment, and his death, all on the same day. It's just so it's really efficient. And we can get back to meditation and do it for ourselves. So we have a few minutes, and let's start by hearing a couple of comments from some of you or questions you might have, and maybe it's nice to hear other voices here in the community as we start kind of shifting to a more community-based process. Does anybody want to share anything?
Good morning, Gil. Thank you so much for today's talk. Sorry. Thank you so much for today's talk. And my husband and I are also enjoying the Monday through Friday sitting meditations with you. And now, at this point in my life, I'm really enjoying the peace and calm. But I also wonder, I feel like I have this struggle, but I don't know if it's a struggle. My best and favorite memories from childhood are actions and physical. So not peace and calm, and maybe some of that was because of my family environment, but the running and jumping off of swing sets and balancing on various things and tumbling and rolling down hills. And so very much a physical experience. And so I'm trying to figure out what that means. To me, it feels like, yeah, that's being in the moment, but it also feels like maybe too activated and not at peace and not calm.
So fascinating, wonderful that you see that. I'm sure that that freedom you felt in action can be a wonderful reference point for this practice. And you might try doing walking meditation and seeing if a little bit of it can come alive there. And yes, if it's too much energy involved, there can be a feeling of freedom, but it doesn't allow the mind to settle enough to start touching the deeper places that need to be touched in this practice. Deeper places are where more and more of this freedom can be discovered, but can only be discovered if the more activated actions have gotten quiet. But I wouldn't want to dismiss this or say that it's, you shouldn't have it. It might be some way to use it to connect to something. So, go tumbling now before you meditate, and then do walking meditation with it, and then sit down and maybe let things get quieter and see. But and then in deepest in meditation, the deepest places you go in meditation, you could very well re-experience that level of freedom without any action at all.
When I was in 7th grade in San Francisco at a Catholic school, and it was very warm, and all the windows were open, and the nun was droning on and on for some 50-minute lecture like they used to do. But I very distinctly remember, I've never told anybody this, I very distinctly remember that the feeling of kind of leaving the room, hearing the outside world come in, and then I felt connected to the entire world, that the entire world was humming all at the same time with me. And I kind of left my ego, and it was just this collective world.
Very nice. Yeah. So some of you maybe have had experiences like that. Some of you don't have any memory like that, and what you remember is the opposite. Some people have had all kinds of very tragic experiences, very difficult experiences growing up. And I don't want to belittle or dismiss that or ignore that. That's some people's experience. And for some people, that's why they come to practice. And I don't know if it's a coincidence. The Buddha died when he was a baby. The Buddha's mother died when he was a baby, which that kind of loss is huge. So that maybe also was in his psyche as he was kind of finding his way with all this, and because he was certainly motivated to try to find an end to suffering. So I well imagine that he knew suffering well as well. And so both are very important for the Dharma, to be honest about, to see, to recognize. And what the Buddha was trying to teach, I believe, is that in order to address suffering well, it's good to create a really good state of mind and heart that prepares you to hold it in a good way. Be able to hold it in a generous, open way without being a victim of your suffering, but rather to be a healer of it and find the freedom in it. And so the sense of joy and happiness that can come with practice is in the service of addressing the suffering. It's not an escape from it, and not some kind of way of just going around and just pretending everything is just sweet and wonderful, and you can just ignore the suffering of the world. The suffering of the world is being addressed, but it's with this finding a different lens, a different approach, different way of holding it, different capacity to be with it than most people learn on their own. So we have still a few minutes before the usual end. So if you're willing to stay for a few minutes, and it'd be nice to have, yes? One more person wants to speak? Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm Lance, and earlier when you asked us what memory we have of peace, what came up for me was being in my parents' room when I was young with my siblings, and we're all just like enjoying our time together. Like we were singing, sharing pizza, and that was great. And another memory was me hiking alone in the wilderness, and just like looking at the mountains. How does one reconcile the sense of peace amongst others or within a community, and also like in solitude? Like, what is
between the peace in the community, like in the family, and what's the other one? In the nature?
Yeah, like like peace in solitude, like say meditating or hiking alone. Like, how do we? What is peace? I guess. Sorry, that might be a loaded question. But,
So I don't know, but but whatever. But I think I appreciate this question a lot. It seems like coming from an important place in you, that peace can be experienced. Peace is not an issue about who you're with or not with, or where you are in the world. Peace has to do with the quality and characteristics of your heart. And some environments kind of create the conditions that support the peaceful heart. And maybe the quality is a little bit different, the characteristics are a little bit different in different situations, but the center of focus is not the external world, it's to be experienced by the wise, personally. And so just to start discovering some of the operating principles inside, how the mind and body and heart work, how you lose the peace, what supports it, so you can begin finding, identifying, and living with it as a companion, no matter where you go, and you take it with you.
Thank you.
So the idea is now, if you would turn to maybe a couple of people next to you, and just look around so that someone's not left alone because everyone turns the other direction by coincidence, and say hello. And introduce yourself, and then if there's anything from this talk that inspired you, maybe share it with in a few brief words. Don't tell a long story. But just you want to hear from others, and just say hello, and I'll ring a bell.